Hello, just want to show you some of the enemy and the artificial intelligence parts of the assignment. So I made sure that all of my scenes worked. Well, I couldn't test the lose because I hadn't added that option in yet. But my win scene worked, as well as my music player played throughout all of the scenes, from the welcome to the game to the win scene. And when I'm testing, I just want to come over here to the player script. When I'm testing, I like to try to not have my 50 pickup items mentioned here. So I drop that down to 1 or 2 to test, and then go back and change that to the pickup amount. So in testing, you want to change that number of if the count is greater than or equal to blah, then you advance to this scene. So that's just my tip for you right there. Back over to the Unity section, I went into my asset store, and because I had already imported the iguana, I was able to just look into my assets pile here and type iguana. I found my iguana. You download it, you import it, you know this process. So I'm not going to go over how to bring that iguana in. I brought the iguana in, I placed it in the scene right over here, and I resized it to what I state in the lecture material, 555 here. And then I added a nav mesh agent to the iguana. So the nav mesh agent was very, very simple to add. I said add component, type nav, selected nav mesh. Then it provided me with these numbers. And in the text I tell you change these numbers to these settings. So if you do, you do. And you might want to change those later, but I would stick to that kind of component. If you want to use a different character for your enemy, it's important that your enemy does have a capsule collider, which is triggered, and it is also important that your enemy has a rigid body, which has the gravity and the kinematic selected. That is important. Then you make it your nav mesh agent. Next in the process, after I created the nav mesh agent, I unchecked these two controllers that came with the iguana script, and I created my own enemy controller script. And that script is available to you within the course. So here it is, enemy controller. I'm going to double click it. It's going to open up here. I have my enemy controller. I also have that scene management, because when the enemy, the nav mesh agent, the enemy, when that enemy sets forth to the target, it's going to try to find that position. It's going to go to the speed of what we set. We set our speed in our float section in our animator controller. You remember that? I'll show you that too. And our target is the player. So if our enemy hits this player, this game object, it's going to become false, which means it'll be invisible. And then the game will load the scene lose. So let me go back into Unity and explain the animator controller. So I ask for you to make a very, very simple animator controller. And by default, you have an entry state and an exit. So we just right-clicked in our area, created an empty state. I renamed it walk. I added the animation. We create another state. I added that animation. I created a float over in the parameters by selecting the plus option and created the float, and then typed the title speed. because that's what the script is calling on for our iguana to move. And we have set the speed, right? The speed was set with the nav mesh agent. I know it's just all like, ah. So we come over here and our speed is set here. So I've added that enemy controller script to our iguana. So I've unchecked what was there, which makes it invisible and not usable, and added the enemy controller script. So we have our enemy controller script, NavMesh agent. I tagged it enemy just in case. Head over to my third person. It's tagged player, so that's good. My enemy has its capsule collider is triggered set, and it has its rigid body. It is kinematic and use gravity set. And now I select my environment. So I put all of my environment in an empty folder. So I'm going to select the environment, and I went to Windows, AI, little different from the lecture, Windows AI Navigation. Windows AI Navigation. And it gave me the navigation component. So I had to set my navigation basically to what the NavMesh agent's numbers are, which I did right here, and then I selected bake. Now what I noticed with my terrain and information here this time around, I'm going to bake it again just in case, is when I tested the enemy, my enemy would not go up the slopes. I've made some pretty high steps that my character jumps on. So what it's going to tell me after I show you the test is that I'm going to have to place some enemies strategically throughout the area because they can't climb the huge steps that I've created, and I've changed the step height and everything. I mean, I'll do it with you if you'd like, but I've worked with these numbers and it's just not working. So let me show you with the test what happens with the enemy. So with the enemy, you can see it over there coming towards the player. And let me just move the player a little further, and you can see the enemy chasing the player back and forth, but it can't climb the step. So that's a problem. So I'm going to have to work on that little issue and try to find the right variance. But for now, I'm okay, because if my enemy and my player collide, it moves to the lose scene. I'm going to show you that one more time. If my enemy and my player collide, the game advances to the lose scene. So I just jumped on them and it advanced. So one more time, and I'm going to run over here. I'm going to actually jump. Okay. So you can see it works. But as stated, my enemy character can't climb those large pitches. So I'll play around with the numbers here. I'll play around with them, but that doesn't mean that it's going to work. So my other option is to place the enemies strategically throughout the game so they can move around, and it can be challenging. I don't want my enemies stuck in one place. Well, that's what I have for you today.